Hey guys, welcome back to The Joy of Wrenching. My name is Les. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic. And today in the shop, we got this 2018 Dodge Ram 1500. It's got the big 3.6 liter in it. It has 100,000 miles, and you know what that means. It's time for new spark plugs. So I want to show you today how to put new spark plugs in one of these Pentastar 3.6 Dodge Rams. This will be good for 2011 through 2018. And I know there's a few other videos out there, but they're typically missing some of those little tips and tricks that I want to show you. And it'll make your lives easier, save you a bunch of time, bunch of money. So let's get into it. So the truck's at 100,000 miles, and they put these iridium spark plugs in there from the factory. And they're supposed to be good for at least 100,000 miles. And typically they will be. But what I've seen on these trucks is that when they get around 150,000 miles or so, they start misfiring. And so if you're having a problem with misfires, especially you're in that 150,000 mile range and you've never changed your spark plugs, definitely time to do it. But we're going to do it now at 100,000. And so I've got some new iridium plugs here, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy it can be, how quick we can do it to get these new spark plugs in here. And this will also be good if you need new coils, but those typically last for a lot longer, maybe a couple 100,000 miles, especially if you're good on changing your plugs every 100,000. So today we're just doing the spark plugs, but I'll be showing you how to get to the coils as well. So the first step of getting down to our spark plugs is going to be removing all of this plastic, this intake here off the top. And so to get this out of our way, we're going to pop these clips loose on the side, and there's two on the back. You just take your finger and push them back. Well, it looks like there's only one on the back. And then just lift it up, and this side is good. Now we're going to come over here to the other side, come around on this side, and I'll show you that right underneath here, there is an 8mm bolt that holds this intake to the throttle body. And then also we have an air intake sensor right here. So just pinch that and squeeze it, give it a little wiggle, and it'll come unplugged. Pinch that black thing and pull it back loose. Back here, we have a hose that's hooked up. Now, all you got to do on this one is real easy. You want to get your fingers around it, underneath, and give it a squeeze. You might need to push in a little bit and then pull out, but you'll feel there's a tab on this thing, and I'll show you once I get it undone. There we go. So there's a tab here where my pointer finger is, this finger I'm moving right now, and you just push up on that tab, and what happens is it spreads out these little fingers here, and if you push up on that tab, push in and pull out, you'll get this thing to release real easily. All right, now we've got this hose undone here. We've unplugged our little air sensor, or temperature sensor. We've loosened the worm clamp here at the front of our throttle body. We just give it a pull and a wiggle forward like that, and then the whole kit and caboodle can lift off and be set out of the way for later. All right, look at all this room we've got to work now. And luckily for us, this passenger side over here, very easy to get to our spark plugs and coils. These are the coils, 1, 2, 3 on this side, and there's 3 on the other side. And so if you need to change your coils, real easy. You just unplug this coil and unscrew it right here with a 10mm, pop it out, pop a new one in. The spark plugs are right under it. So these are really easy to get to. The ones that are a little tricky are going to be the other side of the engine, because you see how that intake wraps over the top of the engine here, and it hides the 3 spark plugs that are underneath right over here on this side. And so I'm going to show you how to get this intake out of the way real quick and easy so that we can get to the spark plugs on this side too. All right, so now we're going to be up underneath the hood here, and I find it a lot easier, especially on my old bones, to use something like this. This topside creeper, it lets me get up and on top of and lay over the top of an engine instead of having to be on my knees or laying on top of the core support here and getting all cut up or bruised up. This makes it super easy. I've got both hands available to me. It's actually kind of restful to be up here. Again, I'm trying to keep the joy in wrenching here, guys. let's start removing what's necessary to get this intake out of the way. And if you look here, you've got all of these hoses and all of these wires, but don't be intimidated. This is not that big of a deal. This is your purge valve right here. And so just grab that thing, give it a little wiggle, and it'll come off of this little perch that it's on right here. It just slides right up, and that'll be free and out of the way now. We'll just pull it to the side. Also, you've got a couple of hoses down here. Just pull those out of the little holders here on the side of the intake. And again, we're just going to pull these things to the side. All we're going to do is try to move these things out of our way. Next thing we want to do are going to be these hoses where they're connected here to the intake. So just give them a little pull and a wiggle, and see how much freedom that gives us to pull all of the rest of this kit and caboodle over here to the side. Man, I tell you, doesn't that make it easy? All right, and the next thing we want to do over here is you've got this little wiring harness here that's connected with these two 10mm bolts. So get your little socket, 10mm socket, and we'll remove these two little bolts. Hold on to them because you're going to need them. Put this back in place here in a minute. But that's all we need to do. And now that can just slide over out of the way as well. We'll go ahead and set these bolts here where we'll remember them. All right, so as you can see, we've really cleared up a lot of space on this side now to get to the retaining bolts for this intake that hold it down. And that's going to be how we remove this intake. But before we do that, we've got a couple of attachment points on the other side here that I want to show you, and we'll get those released as well. All right, so for the driver's side here, or the left side of the vehicle, we've got some more wiring harnesses and hoses. So for the hoses, just grab hold of it, give it a little pull and a wiggle, and it'll come undone. And then for the wiring, if it's got a red tab or a gray tab, just remember you slide that tab back. Well, this one just broke off. Look at there. So we'll have to get us a little pick. But basically, we want to pick that little piece of that red tab out of there, and then we can give it a pinch and a squeeze and pull that out of there. I will get that in just a second. But you see how this wiring harness is held to the plastic intake with these little Christmas trees? Bob Ross loves trees, and so do we. We're going to remove these trees and save them. So there's that one out of our way. And we'll go ahead and let's see if this whole sensor will just pop right up and out of there. No, doesn't want to come out easily, so we'll go ahead and unplug it. But let me get a pick and get rid of that little red plastic lock. So if those red plastic locks break off like this one did, there's just a little bit of it left in there, just get you a little pick like this and kind of find the tip of it and push it out. See, now it's out of our way. We can give it the old pinch and squeeze here and wiggle and unplug it. It's not too bad. It's not fighting us too bad, is it, guys? All right. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is we're removing our throttle body with our intake, and you see it's plugged in over here, and it has a gray locking tab. So let's move our gray locking tab back, just like we did for the on the red one, and just roll that back a little bit, and then you can give it the same old pinch and squeeze, wiggle, and unplug that harness. And then it is held to our throttle body down here by this little middle clip. So just undo that, right, like so. And now the wiring and the hoses are all undone on this side right here. The only thing retaining our intake on this side are these studs. There's two right here with a 10mm nut, and then look back there. Back there, we also have two more. And let me see if I can get you a better shot. There's two more nuts on some studs back there, just like these in the front. All right, so the only thing left retaining our intake on the driver's side here are going to be these two nuts on those studs, and then there's two other nuts. So let me move this little pipe out of your way so you can see better. You see these right here? We also need to remove these two nuts. Now, don't worry about the bracket or the studs themselves. You don't have to loosen them up to get any play or anything like that, because we're going to lift up this intake and slide it over as we do so. We're going to tilt it and move it out so that these brackets can stay in place. All right, so let's go ahead and start attacking those nuts on those studs. And what I found that works best for this is one of these really long extended handle 10mm ratcheting wrench, okay? I'll put links in the description to this stuff. I'm not sponsored by them, but I really find things like this really make your job a whole lot easier. You can reach way back there, use the leverage of the long handle there and just break these things loose and get them turning. Once they're turning enough, unless you live in a real rusty area, you'll be able to twist these things off with your fingers. We're just going to break them loose with this tool, and then we'll go ahead and undo them with our fingers here. All right, so we got them loosened up with the wrench now. We can get in here with our fingers and just unscrew it. Keep your fingers on there so you don't drop them into the nether regions of the engine. There we go, there's one of them. And we'll go ahead and get that other one as well. There she goes. All right, and like I said, this little bracket here, you don't have to worry about loosening it up on the other end of the bracket to get any play in it or anything like that. We'll just go ahead and rotate this, this intake out of here and get those studs to pass through that bracket. And we'll go ahead now and get these two, which are much easier to get to, obviously. These other nuts, 10 millimeter here as well. So for these two nuts, much easier to get to. You can get your socket on these 10 millimeter, just break them loose there, and then buzz them out. Break these loose. And I'm going to go ahead and stop before it gets to the end, just so it doesn't fall into the lost nether regions, right? Here we go. There's one, and there's two. Okay, so that's all that's retaining and holding the intake down, except for the mounting bolts holding it to the lower plenum. So we'll go ahead and we're going to remove the mounting bolts for the intake here, and I'll show you those. Those are 8 millimeter. Now, before you remove an intake, it's always a good idea to get you some compressed air and blow all the dirt and bugs and everything else that might be here waiting to fall inside of your engine. So that's what I've got here, some compressed air, a little wand. We'll go around the edges here. You'd be surprised the stuff that gets around the intake. That's probably good enough. So the intake is held down by 7 retaining bolts. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's one way back here in the back. Let me see if I can get you back there where you can see that one. Right here where my finger is. Hopefully I can get you guys there. That one right there. Okay, so once you remove those 7 8 millimeter bolts, what we're going to do is we're going to lift up on this thing, and then we're going to slide it over towards the passenger side so that we can get these studs out of those brackets and then slide it on out. So we'll go ahead and we'll get these things loose. 8 millimeter. We'll just loosen them up. You don't have to worry too much about going from the front to the back, the middle to the outside when you're releasing this thing. It's not got a ton of torque on it. Just get you something that will fit in here and get to them. You want to be careful though. You don't want to get under here and start backing yourself out to where you get your tool caught up underneath the cowling or something like that. So you might need to switch, especially for this one right here, might need to switch to a shorter 8 millimeter socket. See, these are the tricks and tips that other people might not tell you that are going to make your day or break your day. And again, we're trying to keep the joy of wrenching. I switch to a shorter 8 millimeter for this one. That way I don't trap myself. Here we go. All right. Now you just want to lift up on all these bolts, make sure that they're loosened. And you can even take them up and kind of give them a little bit of a turn to the left, and they'll stay up. Even these longer ones, they'll either stay up or come out. But we'll go ahead and we'll just leave them in there. I just want to make sure that they're unscrewed, all of them, especially this one in the back. You don't want to forget that one. All right, they're all unscrewed. Now, let's go ahead and remove our intake. So up she goes, just like so. And then I'm pulling it over just a little bit towards the passenger side. And that gets these studs released. And now she can come straight out the front. And we'll set her out of the way. So now that our intake is out of the way, we've got wide open superhighways to the inside of our engine here. And that can be real dangerous if you drop something down in there, and you just never know what could fall in there. So before you do anything else, you want to put some rags into these ports of this intake here so nothing can fall down inside of the cylinders, cause problems with your valves, pistons, and really ruin your day. So let's just do this. We don't expect anything's going to fall in there, but that's why they call them accidents, right? All right, so now we've got an intake out of the way. We can finally get to our other 3 spark plugs and coils. But you see, it's got this little rubber isolator. This is just a sound deadener. And by the way, man, the mice, they love the taste of these things. This one doesn't show any mouse chewings, but I bet you the one that you take off will be all chewed up. You might even find a nice little mouse nest in here. For some reason, they love the taste of these things. All right, now everything's out of the way. We've got full access to all 6 of our spark plugs. This is a V6 engine, 3.6 liter. So we'll take these hoses that we just set aside and we'll just, again, just move them out of our way. And the cool thing about this particular engine is they gave us a lot of room on these wires. So all we got to do is undo this 10 millimeter retaining bolt for the coil, just like so. It stays into the coil. You see that? You can take it out if you want, but once it's loose, it'll stay in that coil. Just give your coil a little wiggle and a pull, and out she comes. And we don't even have to unplug it. The less of these things you got to unplug, the less chance you got to break in these little things. So if you don't have to, don't do it. So here we go. We move that thing right out of the way. And again, notice that our bolt here is retained here. It's not going to just fall out and get lost. And so we'll go ahead and do that for these other 2 on this side and the other 3 on the other side. There's that one. And that one. Okay. A little pull and a wiggle. Pops right on out. Look at there. You can't get them mixed up. You can't actually fit this one in there. It won't reach over and accidentally go in the wrong hole. So don't worry about that. A little wiggle and a pull, and out she goes. All right. And again, if you had to replace your coils, if you had a problem with one of the coil packs, this is where you do it. Just unplug that coil connector like that, and then get you a new coil and put her in there. And just like we did before we took off our intake, we're about to open up passages into our engine again, so it's a good idea. See all that dirt and debris? It's a good idea to blow this stuff off. Get down in here, give it a little blast of air, because sometimes little bits of stuff can be sitting on top of the spark plugs down in there too. So now it's finally time for us to get our spark plugs out of here. And so these spark plugs are 5/8, and I really like these magnetic, flexible head spark plug removal tool sockets. I'll put a link in the description. I'm not sponsored by these guys, but I'm just showing you things that make your life a lot easier. And I've got a little locking extension on here because, as you can see, there's not much of it sticking up out of there once it gets down there and onto our spark plug. And so now we can get to that very easily, and we'll go ahead and we'll break her free. And it's not that hard to undo, and then we'll spin it out. All right, let's see what these things look like. All right, there you go. So not too bad, really, although we can see that that ground strap is starting to get ate up. And I'll show you, we'll compare it to the new one here in just a second. But these champions are probably the originals. All right, so now it's the perfect time to compare your existing spark plugs to the new ones. You want to make sure that they're obviously the same length, the same thread pitch, and the way you do that is just to sort of fit them right next to each other. And if the threads fit into each other, they're the same thread pitch, okay? And you can see here, the new one, how thick that ground strap, that curvy part is compared to our old one. It's starting to get narrow, getting worn away. And that's from that spark jumping in that gap all the time over the 100,000 miles. So that's why you have to replace these things. The new plugs will come pre-gapped, meaning the space between the electrode and the ground strap is already set. So you typically don't have to set that, but you can check it if you'd like with a spark plug checking tool. These are double iridium made by Bosch. And I like these because the double iridium means that it'll last a long time. All right, so we've removed this spark plug. Let's go ahead and remove the other two. Again, just get in there, break her loose. And you don't have to have electric ratchets. You can use the old-fashioned ones. I just have them, and they save us time. There we go. Let's take a look at that one. And you know, these things, the tips of them are nice and sort of a golden color. There's not oil all over them. If you see anything like that, a bunch of oil on top of the tip of that spark plug, or it's really, really black, that might be an indication that you got bigger problems. But these are looking pretty good, especially for 100,000 miles. Let's get this final one back on this side here. Take a look at it. Looks pretty good. Now, when you go to put your new spark plugs into your engine, modern engines, most of them have aluminum cylinder heads, and the spark plugs are made of steel. Anytime you've got steel threaded into aluminum, there can be some corrosion between those dissimilar metals, and a lot of times, especially in those rust belt areas, you'll get these things seized in place, and it can even rip the threads out of the cylinder head and make it a real problem. So in order to avoid that sort of thing, get you some anti-seize. I like this Permatex silver kind here. The only problem with it is once you use it, man, you turn into the Tin Man. It gets on everything. I have barely touched it, and look, it's all over my fingers. But you just want to put a very light amount, just like so. You don't even have to go all the way around the threads, just a little bit, okay? Just a little bit on the threads like that. And that will be enough to keep these things from seizing in there. And you want to be careful you don't get it on the electrode end, okay? Just a little bit on the threads. Not a little dab will do you. This is kind of like where, you know, people say that I remind them of Bob Ross. Well, here I am painting happy little spark plugs. Okay, so now it's time to put our new spark plugs in. And I put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads already. And I always buy these kind of spark plug sockets that are magnetic. So you put the spark plug in there, and look at there, it holds it. And it's also got a little bit of flex. That way, if I need to, I can come in here almost at a little bit of an angle, just like that, and get her down in, started into that hole. And you always want to start spark plugs by hand, really any fastener by hand, and make sure that it's not going in cross-threaded. Make sure that it's grabbing threads, doing what it's supposed to do. And only then, when you know that it's starting to go in the right way, you want to put on either a little bit of power or your socket ratchet. Go down, and once it bottoms, stop. You don't want to tighten it up with one of these electric ratchets because, believe it or not, like this Milwaukee, this thing puts out something like 50 foot-pounds, and that's too much. You don't want to over-tighten your spark plugs. So I'm just going to run them down with this, and once it stops, and then we'll tighten it up by hand. Let's get the second one in. So, take that off of there, set it in there, get it started by hand. I can feel that the threads are grabbing. Give it a little wiggle and a pull. Now we can run it down. There it is. And the third one on this side, ready to go down. A little wiggle and pull, it's threaded in. Down she goes. All right. Now here's where you're gonna use your actual hand ratchet, manual ratchet. And you just want to give it a little snug. Once it stops moving, give it a little snug. I'll give you the foot-pound settings for the torque on this thing, but it's not very much. Once it stops moving, give it a little snug. There she is. All right, and the third one, and back here. There it is. All right, so in addition to the anti-seize that we put on the threads of our spark plugs, we need to put a little dielectric grease. hopefully you guys can see that. This is some, I think, Permatex brand dielectric grease. I've about used it up. And all this is a silicone paste. And we're going to put just a little dab in the ends of our coils here. And then we're going to give it a little squeeze, kind of move it around, and that kind of coats the inside of this real good. And what that does is that will create a slick surface for this thing to not get seized and stuck on that spark plug in the future. See how easy that thing goes in and out on that spark plug now? And that way you don't pull off the coil boots in the future or have it seized to it and rip up the plastic. It just saves you a bunch of hassles. The other thing that it does is it keeps the spark from trying to run down the inside of this rubber boot around the spark plug and get to ground and give you misfires. So it's a good idea to keep a little bit of dielectric grease on the end of your coils. A little dab will do you, and then give it the old squeeze. Make sure it coats all over the inside there. Then we'll just aim these back down in there, push them down. You can give them a kind of a couple of jabs in and out. And then you want to get your retaining bolts started by hand. Again, the reason we do that is so we don't cross thread anything. You don't want to turn a 20-minute job into 2 days worth of work. And then we'll get our 10mm socket back out and we will tighten these things back down. Once it's tight, once it's stopped, it's tight. There it is. You don't want to over torque these things either. There we go. Done on this side. Now we're ready to go do the driver's side. All right, so let's get to these three on the driver's side here, the ones that were hidden underneath our intake. And we'll just get the retaining bolts loose, 10mm. And back them out. Now that one, see how that kind of brackets in our way? We'll have to get this one with a shorter 10mm socket. We'll go to this one. All right, so to get to this retaining bolt, I've got a little 1/4-inch drive ratchet with a 10mm socket on it. There we go. And once you break it loose, it should be able to be spun out by hand. So don't get too worried about having to use a 1/4-inch ratchet a million times to get this thing loose. There we go. These things are almost out. All right. Okay, so just like the other side, we just want to give it a little wiggle, turn, pull, and out she goes. And there's enough length on our wiring harness here that we don't have to unplug it. So we'll go ahead and just pull them and leave them here to the side out of our way. There we go. Get this hose out of your view. Cool. All right. Now before we get down in there, we're going to blow the trash out of these holes. Now, really with these boots, if they're in good shape, you really shouldn't have any trash down inside of these spark plug tubes, but you just never know. And there could be something around the outside that wants to fall in there, so it's just a good idea to blow things away. All right, let's get in here and get these spark plugs out. Let's see if my light's in my way here. Looks like it might be. That's okay. That won't be your problem, but I'm just trying to get you guys the best video quality I can. There we go. Now we'll crack this one loose here. There we go. And out she goes. Okay. Now let's take a look at that spark plug. Oh yeah, look at that reddish color. A lot of almost like a burned iron color. And look how thin that ground strap has gotten. So yeah, these are definitely due. All right, so let's get this one here. I've switched to a little shorter extension here. That just gives us a little bit more of an ability to get into these tighter areas. Right, and that one looks clean, also burned up. And the final one here. This one's got a little bit of oil wetness on the threads, but not oil in the cylinder. Sometimes that oil on the threads, if the upper portion of your spark plugs up here is covered with oil, then that could mean that the seal here around your valve cover to the spark plug tube is failed, and oil is getting past that seal and going down into the tube. We don't have that problem, or else there'd be oil all over this porcelain and this silver part here. We just got a little oil on the threads, which is somewhat normal. Little dab will do ya anti-seize on the threads there of our new spark plugs. Just a little bit. You don't want to go overboard with this stuff. There we go. All right, so let's go in with our new plugs. A little anti-seize on the thread. I like to start with the back ones, or the harder ones. Why? Because if I can do the hard ones, I know I got the easy ones made. There we go. Let's get those things started. Make sure it's on, and it is. And now we can get our tools and buzz it down. Okay, stop. So we'll stop. See how quick and easy this can be. You're not filming, talking through the whole thing, huh? There we go. All right, and we'll do the final tightening by hand. Okay. All right, stop moving. That's as tight as I want it to go. All right, spark plugs are in. And just like on the other side, we're going to put a little dab of dielectric grease into the boots. Give it a little squeeze. And we'll aim it down into the hole. See, there's a lot of flexibility to this thing, so you can get them in and out of there, no problem. There you go. We'll get that retaining bolt started by hand. There it is. Go to the next one. Little dab will do ya. All right. Okay. And last one here. Nice good coating of dielectric grease on top of that spark plug. All right, let's tighten these things up. A 10mm bolt. Once it stops, it's done. Can't get to that one with this one, so we'll have to use that little ratchet again. I'll go ahead and run it down with my fingers. That way I don't have to use the ratchet too long. All right, there, that one's nice and snug. Good. We are done with our spark plugs. Let's go ahead and pick up our hoses here, and we'll move these over to the side again and start making way for our intake to go back on. Now that we've finished our spark plugs, we are ready to put our intake back on. And so before you put your intake on, obviously you want to remove these pieces of rag or whatever that you use to block the intake passages, and you want to check these gaskets right here. The original ones, the OEM ones, I think are white. These are blue or green. This is sort of a Fel Pro color, so I think these have been replaced before. But what you want to see is, does any part of this rubber stick up above the level of the black? plastic. And if it does, that's good. If it's flat with the black plastic, go ahead and replace them, because that means it won't seal. But these are nice and standing up above the level of the black plastic. That means that they'll seal the two halves of the intake. This is the lower intake. It'll seal with the upper intake, which wraps over, that we had to take off. So we'll go ahead and remove these now and get our upper intake ready to bolt back in place. And before you put your intake on, don't forget your little rubber isolator. There you go. It just sort of sits down here, and see these holes here. You would think that the entire coil would be showing through there, but no, the hole should show you part of the coil and the connector. And that's how you know it's in place correctly. And it'll feel like it's seated correctly once it's there too. And then also along the front here, you'll see that it sort of matches with the curvature of that valve cover. Now, before we put our intake on, we want to take these bolts and back them up, push it down. So it's like that when it's screwed in. We've backed them out. Now you want to back it out a little bit more and give it a couple of twists. And what it'll do is it'll retain it there. It won't want to fall back down. And that's going to be really helpful, because they won't be sticking down in your way when you want to go and set it back in place. So these are very easy to do that with. These not so much. These longer ones, especially this one here, because it's going to be back underneath the cowl, it may be a little bit difficult to keep that thing up and out of the way, but we're going to do our best. There, that's good. All right. Now let's go ahead and come up in here. These longer ones are a little bit cantankerous, but we'll work with them. No big deal. Just take our time, right? Okay. Now, a couple things to remember as we're going back in here with these. We want these. I'm going to go ahead and remove this long first one. It was just kind of in the way. The first thing that we want to remember is that we got our bolts all stuck up so that they're not going to be in our way. And then also, we've got to put these studs, these 4 studs, back into the holes on their corresponding brackets. So you want to come in underneath your cowl, and this one kind of in the way when it's stuck completely up. So look, I want to show you a trick on how we can keep this kind of partially up and not in our way. All right, so I want to show you guys a little trick that might save you a little bit of a headache. So these bolts around the outside, you pull them up and give them a little backwards twist, and they stay put. They don't want to fall back down. Those are not going to get in your way. This one here, also pull it up. It's completely out of the way. But this guy back here, you see how it's sticking down? We need that to be stuck up a little bit. We need it to come up at least that much right there in order to be out of our way. So what you can do, if you back it all the way up, it's too tall and it runs into the cowling, and it will be real hard to get in there. But what you can do is you can take a piece of hose and split it like that, the length of the amount you want that bolt to stick up, and then let that bolt fall down. And then you look down here, you see that's long enough to where it's not going to be sticking down and in our way anymore. And then whenever we want to, after we get it tucked up underneath there, you just remove this thing right off of there, and Bob's your uncle. All right, so we're ready to go back in here with our intake. We've got all of the bolts stuck up so they're not going to be in our way, except for this guy. We've got this little piece of hose on there, as I showed you, to keep that thing out of the way. We're going to come in from the passenger side a little bit over to the passenger side a little. Let me get my light out of the way. This thing might interfere with this. We're going to come over from the passenger side a little bit, and we're going to aim our little studs into their corresponding holes. See, like that? So these studs have gone into their holes, and then we can set it down, and you'll see that it sets down right in place. There's a couple of little nubs on the bottom of this upper intake that'll sit down in place. You know you're in place when you take your one of your bolts, you start just running it down by hand, and you'll feel it grab the threads. You can take this one, start running it down, and it'll grab the threads. And then here's where we want to come back here and take that little piece of hose off of that bolt and then we'll run it down a couple of threads, and sure enough, it's grabbing threads. See, it won't come out. So this little trick right here, that'll save you so many times. I hope that you guys appreciate that one. Now we removed this one, so we'll go ahead and set it back in place. Again, just give it a couple of twists, and I'm going to do the same with each one of these bolts. I'm just going to twist them down by hand, a couple of threads to make sure that they're going in. And the one in the very back here, same way. There's 7 of them. They're 8mm. Once you get them started by hand, you can go ahead and run them down flush with the plastic. And then these bolts all get tightened to 89 inch-pounds. Inch-pounds, guys, not foot-pounds. Do not use a big torque wrench. An inch-pound torque wrench is a little bitty thing. I'll show you. All right, so let me run these down. I'm just going to run them down till they touch. I'm not using this to tighten them up, okay? And you want to start in the middle and work your way out. So we'll come here and just run it down till it touches. Nice and easy, nice and easy. You see how that thing just barely moves. Now this short one was necessary for this one because the cowling's in the way. We're going to change to our 8mm extended. There we go. Go ahead and get these middle ones started, and then the outer ones. Okay. Okay, all nice and run down. We can swap over to our torque wrench. All right, this is an inch-pounds torque wrench, okay? Make sure it says inch-pounds, and you'll know that it's an inch-pounds and not a foot-pounds because it'll be a little bitty booger like this thing. And so you got your 8mm on here, and you just go from the inside bolts towards the outside, tighten them up to that 89 inch-pounds. Round up to 90 if you want. It ain't gonna hurt nothing. Just tighten her up, and it'll go click, click, just like that. That's how you know that it's tight. Don't go any tighter than that. These are going into plastic, and if you strip that plastic out, you're going to have to replace the whole intake. There we go. Nice and tight. Did the inner ones. Now we can do the outer ones. I like to do the ones on the lower level first because those are seem to be the ones that really help to seal it to the lower intake. All right, so now that we got our intake screwed down to the lower plenum, we'll go ahead and reconnect all the things that we had to undo. And as is my custom, I'm going to do the hardest thing first, and that's going to be putting these nuts back on these studs. So come in over the top here next to your brake booster, get it started by hand. There we go. It's really not too bad as long as you don't drop them. Ask me how I know. There we go. Get that started by hand. These are 10mm, and then we can come in here with our extended reach ratcheting wrench, and we can get those things tightened up. So let me get in here and get on that. These things don't get tightened too terribly much, just enough to be snug. Okay, that one's snug, and once you get the first one snug, you can tighten the other one down by hand quite a ways, and it won't take very much to tighten it up with the wrench after that. Now we got the hard ones in the back done. We'll go ahead and put these 2 10mm nuts on the front bracket. These you can get to with a socket, so they'll be a lot easier to tighten up. Just snug is all you need. There we go. Staying over here on the driver's side, we'll go ahead and reconnect everything that we disconnected. There's this one air hose right here. Goes on that little fitting right there, that little nipple that sticks out. And then you've got your map sensor right there. Nice satisfying click. And remember our Christmas tree that was stabbed in right here. We'll go ahead and put that back. Save the trees. Save the trees. All right. Now we want to plug in our throttle body. So let me reach over here. Get that thing plugged back in. Listening for that satisfying click, and then push your locking tab home, and then the retainer, just put it on the little metal tab right there and push it, and there you go. This one here, this gets plugged into our air intake temperature sensor, which is part of that rubber ducting that we'll put back onto the throttle body here in a moment. And then this hose right here gets plugged in also to the back of that throttle body, or the air intake. All right, so we're done with the driver's side until we put the intake back on, or at least the air intake tubes. And so we're going to come over here to the passenger side, and the first thing you want to do is get your electrical connector and take that, and it's got a little nub there, and that nub goes into that center hole, and that'll line up for the screws, which are 10mm head screws or bolts, whatever you want to call these things. Let's get these things started by hand so we don't cross thread, and then we'll get our 10mm wrench and we'll run those down just till they stop. There you go. Now that's in place, and we can go ahead and reconnect all of our air hoses. So you just take this bit of hoses and you come over the top of that electrical connector, and then you just start pushing them into these U-shaped holders on the intake. And it may help that you come over here and plug the hose in to the intake, like so. Give it a wiggle and a push till it goes home. These two hoses like that. And then come back over to this side, and you can push them into their retaining places. And that will keep them from flopping around. There we go. And then this purge valve, it's got this little isolator that sits down over the top of this nub there. So just like so. That keeps all of that nice and safe and sound and out of harm's way. Now, one thing you may notice is this hose right here. See how that thing's open? You might think, oh my goodness, I forgot something. What did I forget to plug in here? Well, you didn't. This is a vent hose for your transmission, and it is supposed to be open, and it's just supposed to be clipped on here like that. So don't be alarmed. You didn't do anything wrong. That's where that's supposed to be. All right, before we put our intake back in place, turn this thing over and make your life a lot easier. Take some of that dielectric grease again. Just get a little bit on your finger and run some of it around the inside of this sealing connection. Also, a little bit inside of these little stab-on connectors. That's going to allow this stuff to go back together so much easier. You won't be fighting it, and it'll just keep that joy and wrenching. All right, so now let's put this intake back in place. And so just take it and set it down generally where it needs to be. Don't have to get too precise with where you set it down. Now, you want to come here, and the first thing you want to focus on is getting this seal to go around that throttle body mouth. Okay, and the way to do that is to take it from the top here and kind of start aiming it over it, and you want to lift up on the back of the intake. See, I'm lifting up back on here in the back. I'm lifting up. The reason I'm doing that is these little nubs in the back will try to get hung up on different things. And you want to push back at the same time. And you see how this lines up with that. And then the back, these little nubs right here, we can push down into place. And you'll feel them snap on. Okay, now when this is all the way seated back, and these nubs back here are all the way seated down, you know that this thing is in place. And we can go ahead and tighten up our 8mm worm clamp right there. All right, so now we got this thing in place. We'll go ahead and tighten up our 8mm worm clamp. And you don't have to get gorilla tight with it. Now, we want to take our air intake temperature sensor here, plug it, and you'll hear that satisfying click. And the last thing on this side is our white pipe in the back. This one right here. And this guy gets plugged into this nipple right there. So you just take it, aim it towards that nipple, push it home, and you ought to feel hear the satisfying click, and give it a little tug, make sure it doesn't come back off. That's plugged in. And everything is good on this side. The only thing left, and let's go around to this side over here. The only thing left for us to do is to close up our airbox. And you see that the airbox has these little teeth on this side, and they're going to fit into these rectangles right there. And so you want to start those rectangles onto those teeth, like so, and then set it down. Let me show you again. So take those rectangles, start them onto the teeth, and then set it down. Once it's down, you can take your little clips and pull those back up into place. Come look right here. You'll see this last one. I'll show you. You take this clips and just pull them up, and they'll snap back over the top, and that'll hold everything together. And that finishes this job. So you see, guys, it wasn't that hard, was it? I know there's a few little nitpicky areas, but that's why I show you those nitty-gritty details, and hopefully you appreciate that. If this helped you in some way, do me a favor, help me too. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps us to reach a greater audience, and you never know who's out there struggling with one of these that could use one of those tips and tricks we shared today. I really appreciate y'all tuning in and staying tuned to this point. Y'all have a wonderful week, and God bless.